Two different homes, two different families, two different cities. But the same deadly silence running through both of them like a fault line nobody thought to check. What happened inside those houses in the early weeks of 2026 didn't just shock the people who live next door. It reached further than that. It traveled through communities, through news feeds, through conversations people had quietly at kitchen tables and couldn't quite finish, because both cases carried the same weight underneath them, the kind that makes you look around at the people you love and wonder what you're not seeing. In one of those homes, a young girl was forced to make a decision no child should ever be standing at. In the other, only one person walked out alive to tell the world what happened inside. Hi everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, this channel covers real cases, the ones that stay with you, the ones that matter. If this kind of storytelling means something to you, please like, subscribe, and share. It genuinely helps this community grow. Now let's get into it. Cedar Falls, Iowa, is not the kind of place that shows up in crime headlines. That's the whole point. It sits in the northeastern part of the state, the kind of mid-sized Midwestern city where people still wave from their driveways, where kids ride bikes past sunset, where the phrase safe neighborhood isn't marketing. It's just how people describe where they live. Crime rates here run consistently below the national average. Violent incidents are rare enough that when they do happen, people remember exactly where they were when they heard. For most people in Cedar Falls, that kind of quiet felt like something they had earned. A life built deliberately, away from the chaos of bigger cities, in a place where you could actually know your neighbors if you wanted to. But that winter, something was shifting beneath the surface in ways the community wouldn't understand until it was too late. The local domestic violence shelter, a resource most residents knew existed but assumed they'd never need, had logged a significant increase in calls in the weeks leading into February. Advocates working those phones described a pattern they'd seen before. More people reaching out, more people stopping just short of asking for help, more people calling just to hear a voice and then going quiet. The numbers were there. The need was visible. But the connection between that shelter and the houses on ordinary streets like Maplewood Drive was invisible to everyone who lived there, including perhaps the people who needed it most. Cedar Falls felt safe. And that feeling, that deep, unexamined certainty that violence belongs somewhere else in someone else's story, is exactly the kind of ground where the worst things take root. Not because the city failed, but because safety, when it becomes assumption, stops being something people protect. And nobody was protecting Priya Sharma. Sonnet 4-6. Priya Sharma was the kind of woman who made a room feel warmer just by walking into it. At 41, she had built something that took years and sacrifice and the particular quiet courage of starting over in a country that wasn't the one she grew up in. She had come to Iowa as a young woman, built a home from the ground up, raised her children with the kind of devotion that showed in the small things, the handmade decorations at every birthday, the way she remembered the names of her kids' teachers, the meals she cooked for neighbors when someone was grieving. The people who knew her described her the same way, over and over, without being prompted. Warm, present, the kind of person you didn't realize you were leaning on until she wasn't there. Raymond Sharma was 46. Composed in the way that reads as strength from the outside. Dependable was the word people reached for most. At work, in the community, at every family gathering where he stood just slightly apart, watching, steady. He was the kind of man who looked like he had everything under control. Their home on Maplewood Drive was more than a house. It was a compound of people who had chosen to stay close. Priya's younger sister, Kavitha, 34, lived there with her husband Dev, 36. Two families folded into one household, the way some families do when they believe proximity is protection. 3 children moved through those rooms. The house was full in the way that feels intentional. Their social media told the story they wanted the world to see, and it was a beautiful one. Festival photos, wedding celebrations, children in matching outfits. Laughter caught mid-frame. A family that had planted itself somewhere and bloomed. Nobody scrolling through those photos would have looked twice. Sonnet 4-6. It was the kind of thing that's easy to explain away. A neighbor glanced out their window late one night and saw Priya standing in the front yard alone. Arms folded across her chest, eyes on the ground, not pacing, not on the phone, just standing there in the cold, the way someone stands when they need air from something happening inside. The neighbor watched for a moment, then looked away. It happened again 3 nights later. Same posture, same stillness. When Priya noticed she was being watched, she lifted her hand and waved. Soft smile. Nothing to see here. The neighbor told themselves the same thing most of us would, that it wasn't their place, that there was probably a perfectly reasonable explanation. That Priya seemed fine. And she had waved, hadn't she? That wave does a lot of work in situations like this. It closes the door before anyone thinks to knock. 17 days before everything fell apart on Maplewood Drive, someone did make a call. A wellness check was requested. The details of who placed it and exactly why have not been fully disclosed. What is known is that officers responded. They knocked. Raymond Sharma answered the door. The home was calm, no visible disturbance. No one inside contradicted anything he said. The officers noted what they found, filed their report, and left. The case was closed the same day it was opened. That address went into a system, documented, logged, and untouched. A file that existed, but that no one had reason to pull again. Not yet. In the weeks that followed, nothing flagged it. No follow-up was triggered. No one circled back to ask Priya, alone, away from Raymond, whether she was okay. 17 days later, it would have been too late to ask anyway. February 8th started the way those kinds of evenings often do. Ordinary enough that nobody thought to mark it. There had been a gathering at the house on Maplewood Drive earlier that night. Family together under one roof, the way they often were. Food on the table, conversation moving around the room. Arjun, Priya's older brother, was visiting that week, 38 years old. The kind of presence that makes a house feel fuller. He had come in from out of town the way family does, no particular occasion, just the pull of people who want to be near each other. At some point during the evening, something shifted. Investigators describe it as a dispute. The details of what was said, who said it first, and how quickly it moved from an argument into something irreversible are still being reconstructed from what the surviving children were able to share, and what the physical evidence inside the house confirmed. What is known is that it escalated past the point where anyone in that room could pull it back. Raymond left. That detail matters. He didn't stay and let the tension dissolve the way arguments sometimes do when people sleep on them. He walked out of that house while something was still burning, got into his car, and drove away into the February dark. Nobody who was left inside knew what he was thinking during those hours. Nobody knew where he went or what he was deciding. He came back. By 1:47 in the morning, Cedar Falls police were receiving a call from inside 4 Maplewood Drive. And by the time officers arrived and moved through that house, they found what no first responder ever fully prepares for. 4 adults, Priya, Kavitha, Dev, and Arjun, were dead inside the home they had shared. Inside the place they were supposed to be safest. She was 13 years old. That is the fact that sits at the center of this entire story and refuses to move. 13. Old enough to understand exactly what she was hearing. Young enough that none of it should have ever reached her. When the sound started moving through the house, she didn't freeze. Whatever instinct lives in a child who has been living inside a tension she couldn't name, it activated. She moved. She found her 8-year-old brother first, then her 10-year-old cousin, and she pulled them with her toward the upstairs bathroom. She got them inside. She locked the door. And then the 3 of them pressed into that small space together in the dark, listening to everything happening on the other side of it. She heard it all. The voices, the movement, the shots, and then the silence that followed. The kind of silence that doesn't feel like quiet. It feels like an ending. At some point in that bathroom, with 2 younger children depending on her to hold it together, Priya Sharma's eldest daughter picked up her phone, and she called 911. On her father, the man whose face she knew better than almost any face in the world. She gave the dispatcher the address. She told them what had happened, and the dispatcher stayed on the line with her. staying in her ear, keeping her tethered to something outside that locked door, until officers arrived at Maplewood Drive. What those officers found when they moved through that house confirmed everything the child had reported. 4 adults gone. And upstairs, behind a locked bathroom door, 3 children, physically unharmed, alive. But there is a kind of damage that doesn't show up anywhere on a medical report, and all 3 of them were already carrying it. He didn't run. That detail has stayed with everyone who followed this case from the beginning. Raymond Sharma was found 2 blocks from Maplewood Drive, sitting inside his own car. Engine running, hands resting on the wheel, not driving, not fleeing, just sitting there in the February dark, 2 blocks from the house where 4 people lay dead and 3 children were barricaded in a bathroom, waiting for someone to come. Officers approached the vehicle. Raymond offered no resistance. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He said nothing. He was taken into custody on the street where he had stopped, quietly without confrontation, the way someone sits down at the end of something they already knew was over. What investigators found when they processed the scene, combined with what the children were able to tell them, formed the basis of a charge sheet that reflected the full weight of what had happened inside that house. 4 counts of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and then 3 additional counts that don't get talked about enough in cases like this: cruelty to children. Because the law was recognizing something that sometimes gets buried under the larger tragedy. Those 3 kids in that bathroom weren't just witnesses. They were victims too. The state of Iowa said so formally, in writing, on the day Raymond Sharma was charged. When the Blackhawk County District Attorney stood before the court and announced that the office would be seeking the death penalty, the room was quiet, in the way that rooms get quiet when the weight of something finally becomes official. Outside that courtroom, the neighborhood around Maplewood Drive was trying to absorb what it now knew about a house it had driven past 1,000 times, without a second thought. Some of those neighbors still can't drive down that street. 600 miles northwest of Cedar Falls, in a suburb of St. Paul that most people describe the same way they describe every quiet American neighborhood. Another family was already gone. Roseville, Minnesota sits just outside the city, the kind of place where the streets are clean and the houses are kept, and nothing about the exterior of any given home tells you what is happening inside it. Sandra Whitfield was 46 years old. Her neighbors remembered her as steady, present, the kind of mother who showed up. Her son Marcus was 16, a teenager still becoming whoever he was going to be, still in that particular stretch of life where everything ahead feels wide open. There were no prior police calls to their address, no wellness checks, no neighbor who noticed something and hesitated, no file sitting unopened in any system, no warning that anyone, looking back, can point to and say, there. That was the moment someone could have stepped in. On the morning of January 29th, Jenna Whitfield woke to the sound of gunfire inside her own home. She was 20 years old. She would later tell investigators that her father, Daniel Whitfield, had shot Sandra and Marcus before turning the weapon on himself. By the time Jenna reached for her phone and called 911, she was already the only one left. There was no arrest, no charges filed, no courtroom where anyone would be held accountable, no day of reckoning, no verdict. Daniel Whitfield made certain of that when he died in that house. Whatever he was carrying into that morning, he took it with him completely out of reach. What makes the Whitfield case sit so heavily alongside Cedar Falls is precisely this. In one case there were signs. In the other, there were none. And both families ended the same way. There is a particular kind of silence that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive dramatically. It builds slowly, over months, sometimes years, inside families and communities that have every reason to keep things private, and very few safe places to put them down. Inside tight-knit immigrant households, that silence has a specific texture. It is held in place by cultural expectations that run deep. The belief that family suffering belongs inside the family, that asking for outside help is a form of betrayal, that what happens behind a closed door should stay there, because the alternative is shame, judgment, and the unraveling of everything you spent years building in a country that was never guaranteed to accept you in the first place. For families navigating immigration anxiety, that calculation becomes even more loaded. Calling the police doesn't feel like reaching for safety. It feels like risk. It feels like exposure. And so people endure privately, and communities look the other way politely, and the silence holds until it doesn't. The neighbor who saw Priya standing outside alone after midnight made a completely human choice when she looked away. Most people in that same moment would have done exactly the same thing. The officers who responded to the wellness check followed their protocol. The system processed what it was given and moved on. Nobody in this chain was acting with malice. And yet, every single link held the silence in place just a little longer. The photos on Priya's social media told a story that was easier to believe than the one happening inside that house. And communities, all communities, have a tendency to trust the version of a family that the family presents publicly, especially when that version is warm and bright and gives no obvious reason for concern. The cost of that trust in this case is measured in 4 names: Priya, Kavitha, Dev, Arjun. Say them slowly. They deserve that much. Before we close, there are names that need to be said, not as case details, not as data points in a documentary about domestic violence statistics, as people, as lives that existed fully and completely before the night of February 8th reduced them to a file number in a county courthouse. Priya Sharma was 41 years old. She was warm and devoted and elegant and present. She came to this country and built something real inside it: a home, a community, a family that she loved loudly enough to document every moment of. She deserved to grow old in that house on Maplewood Drive. She deserved to watch her daughter become whoever she is going to become. She did not get that. Kavitha was 34. She chose to live close to her sister because that is what people do when they believe that staying near each other is a form of protection. Dev was 36. He built his life inside that same belief. Arjun was 38, visiting for the week, present for reasons that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with love. All 4 of them were gone before February 9th arrived. And then there are the 2 who survived. A 13-year-old girl in Cedar Falls who locked a bathroom door and made the hardest call of her life. And Jenna Whitfield, 20 years old, who walked out of a house in Roseville, Minnesota, as the only one left standing. 2 girls, 2 states. The same unbearable weight of a morning that rewrote everything. They are still here. They are still carrying it. And the least the rest of us can do is pay attention to the people around us, to the silences that don't quite add up, to the waves that mean nothing is fine. If someone in your life is struggling, or if you are struggling yourself, help is available right now. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is free, confidential, and available 24 hours a day. Call or text 988 from anywhere in the United States. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available around the clock at 1-800-799-7233. You do not have to be in immediate danger to call. The in-between moments are exactly what they are there for. Remember their names, and look a little closer at the people you love.